Design. I hope in this series that you're wrestling with, how has God designed me? How has God designed my life? How has God designed my relationships, my family? How has God designed this world? What difference does it make? What does it matter? And through this whole series, we're wrestling with a tension between this is how God designed the world, and we have that choice to embrace that, or we can take another option and be deceived and step into a deception. And these two paths lead very, very, very different places. In one sense, it's our reality because Adam took this other path. And in that setting, threw all of God's design into chaos. But God's not done. And he's working to recapture, to redeem his design in each of us. But there's something about going back to what was originally intended. Even though we're so far away from experiencing it, even though our world is wrecked by sin and its impact on us personally, on all of our relationships, on the very created world that God designed, even though that's true, God's still at work, calling us back to a design. And we can get better glimpses and pictures of what he originally intended as we dive into these first couple of chapters of the Bible. And so I want to dive into a topic today that, I'll be honest with you, it's the one message that, this is not going to make you listen to me more probably today, okay? It's the one message that you kind of have to do, and it's not my favorite. And so it's not necessarily even my expertise. But yet it's so vital to the message of Genesis, and it's so applicable to the attacks of the Bible, on the Bible, that we just have to dive into it. So here we go, okay? Does that make you really want to be here? Here we go. Genesis chapter 1, as if we were going anywhere else. Genesis chapter 1, here we go. Verse 20, we're all the way to 20. Then God said, let the waters swarm with fish and other life. Let the skies be filled with birds of every kind. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that scurries and swarms in the water, and every sort of bird, each producing offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply. Let the fish fill the sea. Let the birds multiply on the earth. And evening passed and morning came, marking the fifth day. Then God said, let the earth produce every sort of animal, each producing offspring of the same kind. Livestock, small animals that scurry along the ground, and wild animals. And that's what happened. God made all sorts of wild animals, livestock, and small animals, each able to produce offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. There's this little phrase that gets repeated over and over again here. Of the same kind. Because God made different kinds of animals. And he gave them, in how he created them, the ability to reproduce and to multiply after their same kind. That's what the Genesis record records. Unfortunately, that's not what any of us in this room have been taught about how things happened and how things happened to, by chance and mystery, over billions of years, evolve. See, the reality is what we've been led to believe and what we've been taught and what's still taught today in the public sector is simply that one kind somehow became another kind. And that's honestly really tough to get your head around if you really want to think about it. Because even if you just stay with the same kind, okay, let's just take, I don't know, pick an animal. Koala bears, okay? Let's just say a koala bear evolved, okay? My first question is, did the male evolve first or did the female evolve first? That's a really good question, right? Like, because one of them had to move from a different kind into the koala kind, right? I mean, at some point in time, has to happen. So did it magically happen that the male koala evolved into that kind and the female koala evolved into that kind, like just at the same time? So that then they could produce not just other koala kinds, but any kind, goldfish kind. I don't know. Probably goldfish came first in that order somehow. Like the irrational understanding of what we're said is like fact, proven truth, taught in all of the textbooks that we ever read, widely accepted at all the major universities, including UCLA, USC, because we're going to hear from a few of those professors here in a second about what they believe and how they stand up. I mean, these are the leading professors in our country, okay? And how they stand up to just some of the basic questions like this. Because at the heartbeat, this is what the Bible says. And if I'm going to be predisposed to believe it, then I think it needs to, it's some scrutiny is warranted. But this word kind is really, as it's come to known in our system of classification, and don't quote me here, I'm just getting this out of really, really good textbooks, but put this graphic up. This is classification of organisms, all right? And when we're down at the very bottom, we're at that, like that's the species level. That's what we see and interact with, okay? And you move back up into the genus, and then you move to the family and order and class and all that. This word kind is equivalent to a family classification, okay? So we're in a realm of organization that's at a defined larger level than what we're talking about at individual species. We're in the dog kind, okay? We're not in the Dalmatian world, okay? Does that make sense for you? Does that help? Do we need to get a different dog to help people? Okay. Because those different dogs, those are down in the species level. And it's actually funny when you dig into this and you dig into why different breeds are different ways. At one point in my life, my mom bought me a Shar Pei. Anybody know what a Shar Pei dog is? Like wrinkles, too much skin. I had no idea how many problems these dogs have. Do you realize that I had to get my dog's eyebrows stitched back to themselves? Do you know why? Because the skin rolls over his eyeballs and scratches his eyeballs because he's got too much skin. So you gotta pull that out. What do you call that? We won't even get into it, ladies. No. You do a little lift there, all right? Whatever you call it, all right? Why does that have to happen? You know why that has to happen? Because what we call purebred dogs are actually dogs that have gotten down to this species level, and we only breed them with others who have the minimal characteristics that these have so that we can produce other exactly like them. It's not a progression, it's actually a regression. And the more you do that to different species, the more problems those dogs have. That's why there's like veterinarians that charge you for dog dental work, right? And all kinds of things that are problematic when different elements get magnified over and over and over again in different, quote, purebreds. That's a species level. When God says each producing offspring of the same kind, He's at this family level of classification in our world, okay? So kind, when you read kind and you translate it into science and their classifications, you need to say this kind equals the family classification. Now with that in mind, I want you to watch this video real quick. It's by Ray Comfort, and he has some interview questions for some people that are biology majors at major universities, as well as some of the leading research scientists at these universities. Take a look.
You're an atheist?
I am definitely an atheist, yeah.
Now, why are you an atheist?
Why am I an atheist? Because there is no God.
Atheism assumes that you can disprove the existence of a God. Agnostic is a more correct term, but I'm an atheist.
Are you an atheist?
Yeah. I am an atheist, yeah.
I am, yes.
I am.
So you're not an atheist?
No, I'm not.
So you're leaning that way because of evolution?
Yeah.
I don't believe in there's a guy in the sky that lives in the sky.
You believe in evolution?
Of course I do, yes.
Live science says of Darwinian evolution, it can turn dinosaurs into birds, apes into humans, and amphibious mammals into whales.
What Darwin showed in his work on evolution and natural selection is that we don't need to invoke any supernatural force or power to account for the development of life through time on Earth.
The ongoing processes that are observable in today's world.
Do you think it's a belief?
I think it's just fact.
I think more like facts.
There is too much evidence to ignore.
Do you think it's a belief?
No, it's science.
It's the way it happened.
It's logical.
You know, all the scientists pretty much agree with it.
It's more of a fact.
When did you start to believe?
When I started to think for myself.
When did you start believing?
When I took my first biology class.
It all started to make a lot of sense. The teacher made it very, very easy to understand. I generally trust the scientific community. Makes more sense than any religion or anything. The fossils they found of all the cavemen, the Homo sapiens, dinosaurs, it shows clear evidence.
I believe in science.
What's your major here at this university?
Biology.
You're a biology major?
Yeah.
You believe in evolution?
Yes.
What's your major?
Geology.
Chemistry?
Biochemistry. Environmental science and policy. I'm a physicist.
Biochemistry.
Okay, do you believe in evolution?
Yes, I do.
Do you believe in evolution?
Yes, I do. Of course.
Yes, I do.
I do believe in evolution.
You believe in evolution?
Yes.
Are you a strong believer?
Yes.
Are you a strong believer?
Yep. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
A scientific method is based on the collection of data through observation and experimentation. Science Daily.
Could you give me some observable evidence that evolution is true? Something I don't have to receive by faith.
Yeah.
Some observable evidence.
I mean, take a look at what happened 65 million years ago.
Hang on, I can't. That's 65 million years ago.
I believe, millions of years.
So that can't be observed.
We can trace the evolution through the fossil record.
Could you be specific? Just give me one.
Between 6 and 7 million years ago.
Hundreds of thousands to millions of years?
So it's quite a long time.
Yes.
Millions of years.
Yes.
So it can't be observed.
Evolution is not testable over time.
We are condemned to live only for a few decades, and that's too slow, too small a time scale to see evolution going on. Richard Dawkins. We see nothing of these slow changes in progress until the hand of time has marked the lapse of ages. Charles Darwin.
You've got the canine kind, the coyote, and the domestic dog, and there's the feline kind, which is the cats, the tiger and the kitten, and you've got humankind. So Darwin said there'd be a change of kinds over many years. So could you give me one example of observable evidence of a change of kinds?
So, for instance, the fossil record shows the common ancestors of all carnivores, that cats and dogs were once linked, once united by a common ancestor.
How long ago?
This, I believe, was like 60 million years ago.
I don't want something I have to accept by faith. I want it to be observable.
Observable evidence. Well, I mean, if you're just asking me here on the street, there's not really much I can tell you in terms of observable evidence. Like, we would have to really examine existing data to draw conclusions of our own.
I would have to have faith then.
We would have to have some amount of faith.
Can you think of any observable evidence for Darwinian evolution where he said there'd be a change of kinds?
Monkey to man, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, a change of kinds.
I don't really believe there's any proof for that yet.
Well, monkeys are the only ones with the 5th digit, like we have.
Well, koalas have a 5th digit. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
I think we're evolved from koalas?
No. When I went to like Washington D.C., I saw they had a whole exhibit just on the.
In the Smithsonian?
Yeah, in the
Oh
Smithsonian.
wait, so that is just like some stuffed dummies, like standing around a fire.
I know that everyone talks about the missing link for humans and whatnot. I believe that there are connections that are out there that we haven't found yet.
I'm gonna trust what those experts did. Those experts came up with.
I have a strong trust in evolutionary ideas based on the evidence presented.
Can you think of any observable evidence for Darwinian evolution, a change of kinds?
I haven't seen it myself, but I believe what the textbooks tell me about it, so.
You've got faith in the expert?
I have faith in the experts, yeah. I guess similar to how religious people have faith that God actually exists, I have faith in the experts knowing what they're talking about.
The scientific method must be observable and repeatable. So could you give me one piece of observable evidence for Darwinian evolution?
Okay, I would point to, as one great example is look at the genetics of the stickleback.
What's that?
So stickleback fish are a very interesting collection of species that were recently isolated after the end of the Ice Age.
What did they become?
They're various species of sticklebacks.
They stayed as fish?
Well, of course.
Can you think of any observable evidence where there was a change of kinds?
Fish.
Human beings are still fish.
Human beings are fish?
Why, yes, of course they are.
How long did that take?
A couple of billions of years, millions.
A couple of millions? How is that observable?
It's not.
We came out of the ground as a mammal, and one mammal created.
Come out of the ground? Didn't we come out of the sea?
Huh? Well, initially in the beginning, we came out of the ground and the sea after the great destruction of the.
So did we have lungs or gills when we came out of the sea?
You want to know something? Those that were in the sea, I guess, had gills, and those that were on land had lungs.
But if we came out of the sea, we had gills in the sea.
You want to know something? Who knows that we came out of the sea or we evolved from mammals?
So you don't know?
Huh? Of course I don't know.
I'm accepting that they did their science correctly.
Could you give me an example of Darwinian evolution, not adaptation or speciation, but a change of kinds?
These are changes of kinds.
They're still fish.
They're distinctly different fish.
We have thousands of examples.
Can you give me one?
I can give you thousands.
Just one.
For instance, I would say look at Lenski's experiments of bacteria then.
So what do the bacteria become?
The bacteria are still bacteria, of course.
So that's not Darwinian evolution. That's not a change of kinds, is it?
It is a change. It is a change in the genetic makeup of the bacteria, which is
still bacteria. So what do the bacteria become?
A new kind of bacterium.
So it's still bacteria. There's no change of kinds. To summarize, the observable evidence that you give me for Darwinian evolution is bacteria becoming bacteria.
No, it is bacteria acquiring new metabolic capabilities.
You said before that there is lots of evidence for evolution. I just want one observable evidence for Darwinian evolution, just one.
But I gave you some. You don't want.
Not some. I want one.
Wait, you don't want that.
I want one. Yes, I do. I'm pleading with people.
You asked me to tell you. You asked me to tell you when I've watched one species evolve into another. Isn't that right?
No, one kind into another. There's 14 different definitions of species. So I want a change of kind.
When you're talking about kinds or change in families, you're actually talking about macroevolution. You're talking about changes on the level that separate, say, cats from dogs.
So could you give me any examples of Darwinian evolution?
Well, when you say examples of that, then you have to sort of look at over a longer time frame.
It has nothing to do with faith. Faith is something that I have to, unseen, I have to believe in.
That's it, unseen. Look, do you believe evolution?
Of course I do.
Are you a believer in evolution?
Yes, I am.
When did you start to believe evolution?
I started to believe evolution when I started to think out for myself.
Is evolution a belief?
Well, you know something? Evolution is a thought process. Is coming to terms and checking out all the alternatives, like taking a look at the religion, man-made religions.
Let me ask you again: is evolution a belief?
No, evolution is, well, yeah. In a word, yeah, I could say it could be a belief.
When you say change of kinds, you mean the evolution of one species from another or to another? Yes, we have that in action actually in the Galapagos.
Could you give me one instance?
Yes, we have an example from a group of birds called Darwin's finches.
You take a look at the difference between the finches on the islands that all started out. I mean, that's very, very observable.
But that's not Darwinian evolution. There's been no change of kinds. What do the finches become?
They become genetically new and anatomically new, recognizably different species.
So they're still finches?
Well, of course, there's still finches. Yes.
There's no change of kind.
Little birds that he had observed.
What did they become?
Their beak shapes.
They're still birds.
Yes.
3 finches that turn into different types of birds.
They're still finches.
Well, for example, Darwin and his study on evolution of the birds on the island that he went on to there.
Their beaks changed?
Their beaks.
They're still birds. There's no change of kinds. That's within the kind.
Evolution on the beaks.
So that's called adaptation. It's not Darwinian evolution. There's no change of kinds. There's no different animal involved. I want something that shows me Darwin's belief in a change of kinds is scientific. Darwin spoke of a change of kind. Can you think of any observable evidence for Darwinian evolution where there's a change of kind?
Change of kind. Change of kind. I'm gonna have to think about that one a little longer.
You give me anything that I can see, observe, and test, which is a scientific method for Darwinian evolution, a change of kinds.
Test and observe.
Could you give me observable evidence, which is a scientific method for Darwinian evolution, a change of kinds?
I gotta think about it. So you want the evidence of it?
I would say
I cannot, I think. It's a hard question, actually. Mitochondrial DNA. So, can you repeat the question again?
Could you give me any observable evidence, just one, for Darwinian evolution?
Let me think about that for a sec.
Observable evidence, something where we don't have to exercise faith. Something that can be observed, like the scientific process, observable.
That's a good question. That one I'm not quite sure.
So you can't think of any observable evidence for evolution?
No.
How do you know it's true?
I'm not sure.
So Darwinian evolution is not observable, it's not scientific.
I guess so.
So it's unscientific, you can't prove it.
It's scientific, actually. You could prove it. It could be proven just...
Do it for me.
That's hard. That's just too broad of a...
It's unobservable, that's why you need millions of years.
Yes, exactly.
You're trusting the biology majors and the biology professors know what they're talking about, and they can't even give me evidence of a change of kinds.
Well, then there isn't one. If they don't give it, then I wouldn't say there was.
I just go on what I've seen and what I've learned from class.
So you believe?
Yeah.
You know what that's called?
What?
Blind faith.
Blind faith.
All right, I want to caution us right here for a second. Because every single one of those people that gave an answer we're going to talk about in the next couple of weeks, is created in God's image with immense, immense value. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood, okay? And man, when you get in this, it gets real personal. And if you're like me, you've lost enough arguments because you didn't know what to say, or you've been made fun of and derided enough because you've just simply held on to faith, that I could watch that, like say 1,000 more times, never get old. Why? Because we're winning. We're winning, but we're not. We're not. Really want to encourage you to watch the rest of that. It's 30 minutes long. I just showed you a third of it. But as you watch it, you will see the compassion of this guy move through these conversations. And his words towards the end of the video to those people are huge in their impact. So please, please, please watch the rest of it. I think I've included the link on your notes on your app. If not, you can, YouTube, like Evolution versus God, I think is what it's under. And you can watch the rest of it. Just be careful, because we're not going to fall into the enemy's trap, okay? As we wrestle through this, and as we wrestle through the differences of opinion and the difference of perspective, as much as it moves away from the Genesis record, the people that hold those views have just been deceived. They have stepped into the world of deception. And we've all been there, too. We've all been deceived in our own ways. And God is calling us to have a compassion that moves above. And for me, it's ridiculously hard. I fail at this all the time. I'm reminding you of it so that I'm reminding me of it. So let's dive into a couple of these and then we'll close up. Romans chapter 1, verse 18 says this, "But God shows his anger from heaven against all sinful and wicked people." Listen, this next phrase, this is what sinful and wicked people do. Before you read this and say, oh, that's why that person's the way they are. That's why that professor is the way they are. We are these people, okay? That's why we celebrate communion. That's why we celebrate redemption, because we have been the sinful, wicked people, okay? We've all been there. But this is what they do. Suppress the truth by their wickedness. Listen, what is evident in the world is true. Like, it is real, it is there, it is present. We even know it in our bones, we know it. And not just us know it, everybody knows it. And it has to be something that is suppressed. Wicked people suppress the truth by their wickedness. Listen, they know the truth about God. Why? Because he's made it obvious to them. Ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see invisible qualities, eternal power, divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God. It is evident in every single person you will ever meet. The truth is evident. And if they don't embrace it, you know in your heart and mind that they've had to actively suppress it. And when we're trying to suppress something that we know is true, we go through all kinds of gymnastics to try to make it not be true. We've all done this. They suppress the truth. Essentially, that, there are no atheists. Everyone acknowledges design, and it exists, and they've had to shut it out. That's why they say, when you get real specific about people who are atheists, I don't even know anybody that's ever really a true atheist, okay? They're frightening people to be around, and if I was an atheist, if there were atheists, they should be afraid to be around me, because there are new rules. I don't, but when they go to it's kind of agnostic, but I'm atheist. Because it just doesn't even make sense. You can't make sense out of it. There are no atheists because people have had to suppress it. To suppress something means that you had to believe it to begin with. You know it's true. It is God's personality and character written all over creation. And next week, we're going to talk about how it's written on us. But evolution is one of the most fundamental ways to suppress the truth about God and live a life that's free of the need to worship God or to be thankful. In our world, in this day and age that we live in, this is the truth. And what evolution has been created to be is a tool to suppress that truth. That's all. To be honest with you, if you examine evolutionary Darwinian evolution, a shift from one kind to another, not speciation, not change in species, not adaptations, okay? Because those are easily explained scientifically. It's not hard. But I mean moving from one kind to another. It's something that was written and theorized 170 years ago. And honestly, if you push the scientific record on it right now, believing in Darwinian evolution is akin to believing that the earth is flat still. Okay? There is no evidence. Seriously, guys, there is no evidence of one kind to another. It just doesn't exist. And so we have to create a theory that it could exist, and we can never, ever, ever, ever prove that theory. And so I don't want to work on trying to disprove that, because the reality is what I'm concerned about is how we suppress the truth, because that's what we've done. And evolution is just a tool of the enemy that has been used to suppress the truth. You can make fun of everybody that asks a question now, right? Well, it's evolution. Oh, it's evolution. Do some work. Honestly, do some real hard work. And if you don't believe me, I'm actually okay with that. Because I believe something about you. I believe the truth about God is written all over this world, and you know it. Because that's what the Bible says. I also believe it's written in your very image, because we're going to talk about that next week. But to close up today, I want to kind of wrestle through what's at stake here. Because I don't want you to leave, oh, we're revved up for a debate. We have a couple of science teachers, high school science teachers here in the room. We have several biology majors, and I get great emails from them. And listen, they're some great, great, great people. And I'm not revving you up for an argument. That's the trick of the enemy, okay? He wants to either deceive people or get people to fight against those who have been deceived. It's a terrible cycle. So just zoom out, wrestle for this for yourself. Design or deception? Which is it? What are you going to embrace? Romans 1, verse 21 says, yes, they knew God. They knew God. That's why there's no atheist. Everybody knew God. And here's where suppression is active. It's not passive. They knew God, but they wouldn't worship him as God or even give him thanks. Worship is really, really, really important. Just is. It's literally the step that Romans describes as a step away from what you know. When you refuse to worship, that is active suppression of the truth. Like when Jesus comes in town and the people are worshiping him this Palm Sunday, and the religious leaders are like, hey, that's heresy. You gotta shut these people up. You gotta quit. What is it? You know what he says? Like, listen, if they're quiet, the rocks themselves are going to shout out. Worship is going to happen today, is what Jesus is saying. One source or the other. When we cease to worship God, that is an active suppression of what we know is the truth. And what is worship? Worship is literally just celebrating, speaking, or getting excited about what is true about God, what we know to be true about God. It's the refusal to suppress, and it's saying, no, I'm going to let it out. I'm going to let it out because I want it to get bigger. And you know when you're around somebody that's excited about something, you tend to get excited about it too if you know in your bones, like, yeah, that's true. That's what worship is. So those of you in the room, like so some of you are like, man, you're into worship. I love worship. I love the experience of worship. I love the freedom of worship. I love not having to think about what I'm going to say next, trusting what we're singing and the music that we do here that glorifies God. Others of you, you're like, man, you kind of take it or leave it. You've never listened, you never like got on Spotify and listened to any of these songs. And it's fine. If you do, you'll know them a little bit better. But regardless of your inclination and your desire, like you cannot step away from worship. It is not passive. Every time you step into worshiping, you refuse to suppress the truth. Because what they did is they knew God, but they wouldn't worship him. And then the second thing, what'd they do? Like, it's like, and if you can't worship him, can you even just say thanks? Even those who can't worship, can you even just say thanks for like being alive? Living in this world? Can you just look at the stars and say thanks? Can you just look at the waterfall? Can you just be on the beach with your toes in the sand and say thanks? Is that so hard? It's such a tiny, but it's huge. I mean, the reality is Romans 1 goes on from here and says, hey, they move into all kinds of places. This is where it starts. And we talk about all the sins that they get into and the selfishness and the sexual immorality and all that. And we spend a lot of time talking about that. Where does it start? It starts with this one thing. You know the truth about God and you actively suppress it. And you actively suppress it by doing two things: refusing to worship, refusing to be grateful. Like, see, worship doesn't cost you that much, does it? Being grateful, it's not paying back. In fact, being thankful is saying, I'm going to express my gratitude and I can't pay it back. I mean, when somebody gives you an extravagant gift, you just write a thank you card. You don't go out and shop for the exact same amount gift and give that gift back. Some of you do, and you have a problem with thankfulness. Because you can't be thankful, you have to be even, and you don't want anybody to get above you. That's a side note, different message, different day. You just say thanks. Thanks. Because it can't be repaid. It doesn't cost you any, but it's a heart position. And you can focus all the time on all these other sins and all these places, because this is what happens. When you refuse to worship and you refuse to be thankful, look what happens. They began to think up foolish ideas about what was like. When you refuse to do those two things, this void comes in your heart and mind, this vacuum that was supposed to be filled with worship and gratitude, and there's nothing there. And so we got to fill it. And our minds fill it. I wonder what God's like. Well, I think he's like this. Well, great. I think he's like this. And I think he's like this. And welcome to our world where everybody makes and remakes God. Not according to his declared word, but actually after a God that they want or they like or they think about better. And usually when you peel back the layers, it's actually they just make God in their own image rather than worshiping a God who made them in his image. So this void comes and they feel it, and as a result, this is what happens. Their minds became dark and confused. I think the telltale moments in that video are when leading scientists at UCLA and USC, they literally admit it. Well, what do they become? Fish? Well, of course they're fish. What do they become? Birds become birds? Of course they become birds. Of course? What do you mean? Your whole world is based on a reality that these become a different kind. Not the same kind, but inherently they know it. And there's a darkness and there's a confusion that you can actually see on their faces. So what does that mean for you and me, all right? Let's bring it home, you and me. Where do you know God but refuse to worship him, refuse to give him thanks? Okay? That's take this away from today, all right? All sin is in our lives is it's just a stubbornness. We know what God wants from us. We know it's even best. But we just refuse to acknowledge him, refuse to worship him, refuse to be in awe of him. And we suppress the truth and we do what we want to do. How many of you do that? I mean, like I talk to people every week. They do this. We talk about it. It's okay. Because then we get to confess it and we get to worship, give thanks. What about with your planning? What plans do you have? Are they plans that you know are from God and you've submitted to them to him and you worship him and give thanks in how those goes? Or are you just saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I will do. What about your money? Hey, it's my money. Do you worship God with it? Do you give thanks for it? Are you grateful? It's just simple questions. But these are the moments in time that define our destinies. When we say, yeah, we know God. Yeah, we believe God. But are we suppressing that or are we worshiping out of that? And are we grateful out of that? What about your marriage? You go through this process there. You say, God, I was built for this. I was made to be a husband. I was made to be a wife. You worship his design in marriage? Or you say, no, I don't want to do this. I want to do it this way. We go on. But you see how practical this is, how personal it is. Worship God. Glorify him as God. Be grateful people. Because that's your very first responsibility. It's your very first stopgap from suppressing the truth about who God is and creating a void that you'll fill over and over again, and it'll never, ever be full. Don't be there. Don't be there. Hey, we're shifting next week in this series to a place where we're talking about being made in God's image and the difference of that. We're talking about being God's creation and foundation of male and female and marriage, the institution of marriage. And then we're going to get into temptation. And I say all this to say, like, this is the record, this is the pathway that we're on. And so some of you have like geeked out on the science side and you're like, this is great. I got more resources for that. And some of you are like, okay, I've had about enough. Let's get on to something else. All right, we're getting on to something else, okay? So in a Sunday that I wasn't overly excited about, I just want you to come back. Is that good enough? All right. Let me pray for us and then we'll go, all right? God, we love you and we're grateful for the design that's clear, evident, in your words recorded for us so that several thousand years later, we can read after its own kind. Thousands of years before Darwin ever wrote anything, before he was even born, before he could even think, before he could even try to fill that void himself, you wrote these words. We trust it. We're grateful for it. Grateful for the truth it reveals. I pray, Lord, that you would allow it to change us, that we worship you because of it in a greater sense. We'd be grateful to you for all that you've made, and that we move with compassion towards every person that you created in your image. We love you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.